Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. First, we would like to say thank you for joining us for this great session that we're about to hear from Pam, who is the Associate Dean for Research Graduate Studies here in the College of Engineering. Just a couple updates we would like to provide to you. She will present, and if you do have questions, we ask that you put those questions in the chat box, and we will provide those questions to Pam. Her presentation will be about 20 minutes or so, and this will be an opportunity to engage you all. And she hopes that you have lots of great questions for her, and we're looking forward to that conversation. Without further ado, I would like to turn this over to Pam. Pam, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Trey. Let me share my screen. So I was telling Trey earlier that this might have been the hardest presentation for me to develop in recent years, mainly because I don't like talking about myself. So he said, "Oh yeah, you have lots to share," and so I said, "Okay, I'll try." So it's hard to wrap up your life in 20 minutes. So I'm hoping that I'll just give you a snapshot of some of the things and then kind of wrap up with, I guess, lessons learned. Trey always talks about lessons learned and how hopefully some of the experiences that I had might be able to make an impression on you that we are resilient and we'll get through anything and we will keep moving forward. So I wanted to start off with just sharing, these are some facts that I'm sure most of you know. Women and girls are really lacking in STEM fields. You can see on the top left, it says about 26% of STEM workers are female. And if you look on the right over here, if you even narrow down further into engineering, you can see that there's really only about 11% of women that are practicing engineers. And just another quick look right underneath that. Can you guys see my arrow or not? Okay, good. When you look at women going into getting a bachelor's degree, there's about 100 female students, and out of 100, only 12 of those choose STEM. And if you look even further, 3 of them are going to continue to work in that field. So really small levels. And Virginia Tech is doing a great job at really trying to enhance the engagement with young girls and women to encourage them to go into STEM. And we also, work at the college level to retain women and really retain them here as engineers to help facilitate the career process. But when I was growing up, things were a little different. So here's me. As you can see, this is my dad with my 2 brothers. I have 2 older brothers. My mom is actually the one taking the picture. And I was pretty much brought up as a girly girl. I think you can tell by my purse and my fake fur and my barrettes and my tights that they really wanted a girl. And they went for it. But my parents, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. And my mom and dad were high school sweethearts. And they got married right after high school and had 3 children by the time my mom was 22 years old. So my dad worked extremely hard to support the family. If you think about Detroit, Michigan, it used to be known as the automobile capital of the world. Most of my relatives were in that field. My dad worked in the automobile field as well. And my mom stayed at home. And so, I received lots of Barbies and dolls and things as gifts. But what I found myself migrating toward is really fooling around with my brother's Matchbox cars. So a lot of you probably don't remember, but Matchbox used to have these little cars and you'd have these plastic tracks and you put them we used to put them all over our house and make bridges. And that's what I did. I played with my brother's toys and they encouraged that. They did not encourage me to go that route. And so move forward. My dad was very, he wasn't an engineer. He's actually in business, but he liked to tinker around. And this is a snowmobile that we used to play around with. And you can see, I have my pink gloves on, but I loved helping him when he was working on the snowmobile or his motorcycle or his car. So I was kind of his assistant. And I grew up really realizing that, thankfully, that there was a lot of other things besides dolls for girls. I did move forward and go to Michigan State University for my bachelor's degree. I chose at the time to go into what they call the softer science. I did my bachelor's degree in physiology. But as I was working my way through my bachelor's degree, I was on the work study program, which some of you might be familiar with. To get federal aid, you would work in different aspects of campus. And so I ended up getting a job at a plant biology lab of all places. And this is plants called Arabidopsis. And so my initial job was just to water them. It was really, exciting position. But as I began in that position, I was working in a research lab, and I began asking a lot of questions about why are you working with these plants? And I come to find out this lab was known internationally for growing plastic plants. And so what that means is this was a lot when there was a lot of environmental concerns about plastics, and they wanted to start making biodegradable plastics. And so they ended up changing the genetics of these plants to make biodegradable plastic. And so I realized that, boy, this is a really cool place to be. And I started asking a lot more questions, and they allowed me to then become more play a more integral role in the research. And that's what sparked my research interest. So these plastic plants. But during that time, as I was playing around with the research, I was also still trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And just like many college students, I had no idea. I thought about going something into the healthcare field. And so I graduated with a physiology degree, but again, this research opportunity that kind of fell into my lap really sparked my interest in research. So I ended up getting my degree, and then I thought, what the heck am I going to do, right? But I thought, I really like that research stuff. So I ended up moving back by where I grew up in the Detroit area, and I got a job at a research facility down at Wayne State University. And so when I was doing that research, it was about the time when biomedical engineering was just becoming a discipline. So it's, for those of you that don't know, biomedical is probably the youngest discipline in engineering, and it's grown a lot in the last several years. And so I was working with Dr. Paul Woolley, who is shown here on the left, and he worked in an orthopedic research. He did the research for the medical students in the orthopedic surgery department down at Hutzel Hospital. And what he said to me is, after working with him for a while, he said, why don't you consider research? And I said, well, I really thought I wanted to, work more with people. And he said, well, you should try it out. So I encourage that with all my undergrads now, is go try it out. Go find volunteer or find a position or internship with where you want to go, because I did that. He encouraged me to go, and I worked at a nursing home and volunteered at a hospital. And I realized that while I was passionate about healthcare, I was more interested in the wheelchairs that they were rolling around in and some of the technology. And so I came back to him and I said that, and he goes, well, that's really interesting, because, these orthopedic surgeons use devices to fix people. And he said, but you really should consider your degree moving forward, getting a PhD. And I said, well, I don't know. He said, well, go talk to this new program is starting in biomedical engineering. Go talk to Michelle Grimm, who's shown there on the right. So I went over, and she was my first introduction to a woman engineer. She was the faculty mentor. She actually had a lot of roles, and you'll see as I think women move forward in their careers, they end up taking on a lot of different roles. She was the faculty mentor, and I talked to her, and she said, well, your research mentor, thinks you're great, and says you do good work, but you don't have the coursework. You're not an engineer. And I said, well, that's true. And so I, set a goal for myself to go back and take those courses. So I spent 2 years taking all those, basic engineering courses, statics, dynamics, engineering math, materials, electrical theory. So I finished those up and I actually enjoyed them. And so I kind of felt that that was, a good sign. And I went back and talked to Michelle and she said, definitely apply, let's get you in. And so I was accepted into that program and I was allowed, they were still growing their faculty mentors. And since Dr. Woolley worked in biomaterials, he was encouraged to become a mentor or a faculty mentor, an affiliate in the program. So I ended up being able to stay with him. And what I did my research on was orthopedic materials. So not plants. I moved from plants to now materials. Still sometimes biodegradable, but that's the closest link I'm going to get here. And so for those of you that don't know, there's a lot of different devices that you can use. We were really focused on the arthritic population, and when your joints wear out, a lot of times they will recommend you get replacements, an artificial hip or knee, which the hips are shown here. However, the lifespan of these implants is about 10 to 15 years, depending on your use. And so a lot of people have to go in and get replacements. So I actually worked with the orthopedic surgeons when they kind of took those implants out. I would collect them in my little baggies and go and do some tests on them. So, that's what my dissertation focus was. So I then decided at that time, did I want to go work? I kind of had several doors open to me at that time. I could have went and worked for an orthopedic surgery department to do research like Dr. Woolley. I could have went and worked. I had opportunity to go to work in industry at a medical device company, but both of those options would have led me outside of the state of Michigan. At that time, I had met my husband during college and we had gotten married and we were discussing having a family. It's always very challenging to figure out when is the best time to do that. Sometimes you don't have choice and it happens, and sometimes you do. But we had a lot of discussions about, how we would raise our family or where we wanted to be. So I made the decision to kind of close the doors of leaving the state of Michigan and pursuing industry. And I accepted a position in the same department that I actually got my PhD in as an assistant professor, a tenure track assistant professor. And so that's where I began my career. And if any of you are considering staying, I have lots of time afterwards, or maybe we could meet up for coffee to talk about the pros and cons of staying in the same university, because there's definitely some benefits, but there's also some drawbacks. And so I moved on. I started growing my research program up, as well as teaching several different classes. But as I mentioned, we began having a family. And so a couple little guys came along during that time. Again, where I'm in Detroit, so there's lots of snow, but fun to play in. So yeah, that was always a huge challenge is how to spend time with the family and be there for my children at the same time as you're trying to grow your career. So lots of challenging days during those times, because when you're tenure track, as you probably know, you have a certain amount of time to kind of prove yourself in order to get that tenure. So there's not a lot of time to take off. And I do think the one thing about our current situation, and especially what I've seen here at Virginia Tech, is the climate really does support work-life balance a lot more than, we've matured a lot in the last several years. Anyways, I kept growing, not only in my family, but I also grew our research programs. And some of the things that we began dabbling in is still in the biomaterials area, but then looking at it for the brain or for nerve cells and nerve regeneration. So kind of a little twist to what I was working on, still in the material side of things, but moving to a different focus from bone to nerves. And this is, in the middle of my assistant professor track, and 9/11 hit. And it's really inspiring to me thinking about, the timing of this talk. It made me think back to some of the impactful situations in my career, and this was one of them. And obviously this weekend was the 20th anniversary, and there was a lot of thought and recognition of what has happened since the September 11th attacks. And the one thing that I wanted to kind of, I think the reason why it had a significant impact on me is because my lab was actually affiliated with the VA hospital. So if you think to nerve regeneration, a lot of veterans actually have nerve pain or nerve damage, and you're looking to regenerate. So I had received some funding from there. So I had a small lab in the Detroit VA hospital, and I walked into the hospital that day to go talk to somebody in the research center, and everybody was staring at the TVs. And I was like, what's going on? And it was just being in a VA hospital when the attack happened was so impactful, and it really made me think about, you know, where I wanted to move the career and what types of aspects of research I wanted to refocus on. And so in the years after that, what, you know, had happened is, I'll go but give you a little bit of my research talk here, just a couple slides if you embellish me. You know, a lot of the soldiers that were coming back from combat were being diagnosed with brain injury, and they don't remember hitting their head on anything. As you would always think of an automobile impact, right? You hit your head on the dashboard or something like that. This was not in their recollection of happening, but they still had symptoms of concussion. And so what they found is, you know, they had a significant amount of people in the military coming back being diagnosed with TBI. And they also found that there was an enhancement. 75% of the people that were being injured is because of an explosive related event. So an IED, etc. And we spend, you know, almost 40 million. I think this was last year's number, annually treating individuals with these conditions. And so what I decided, you know, I'll lead you to how we got into this, but just as some background, when you have an explosion or an IED go off, you have a fireball, which if you're this close to that, there's probably very little chance of surviving. But if you look out here, what happens is that compressed gas actually releases and starts pushing the ambient air. And if you can kind of see this little line out here, it's kind of like a blurred area. That's a shock wave that's developing, and that shock wave can travel for miles past where the explosion hits. And so individuals such as this individual will be, you know, away from an explosion, and you're thinking, okay, I see it there, but the blast wave actually travels and it engulfs them. They're exposed to this blast energy. And so even though it's invisible, I think if I actually had the voice on this, you would hear saying, holy smokes, you know, what just hit me? They can feel that something is happening to them. This is just another example. This one kind of shows you, it's with the dust there, you can see it traveling, and the individual is exposed to that. So those are the types of injuries that, you know, our lab ended up focusing on, is not the severe injuries that are visual. You know, if you get hit by shrapnel or you fall and get pushed and hit your head, that's something visual that somebody can say, wow, yes, you have an injury. But the blast wave itself is something that is invisible, and people who are exposed to this don't necessarily have visible injuries. And so that was a concern with when they said, you know, individuals are coming back, but they don't see any visible injuries. So how could they be having a brain injury? And this became a very controversial subject after the war had started and a few years into it. And so the military actually called, this is Dr. Albert King here in the white shirt. He was my department head, and he's known as one of the grandfathers of biomechanics and injury biomechanics. He did a lot of work with seatbelts and airbags and other safety devices that would prevent injuries, but also specialized in the head. So they called him and said, we have this question and we don't know how to answer it. These people coming back don't remember getting hit in the head, but they have signs of injury. Can you help us study this? And he was kind of at a later stage in life, as you can see, and decided to come into I had lunch. I casually had lunch with some of my peer faculty in the conference room that day. And he came in and he said, hey, I just got this call. You know, is anyone interested in working on this problem? And again, my research had nothing to do with blast or brain injury, but I felt, you know, something inside of me say, that's a question that I want to work on, that I would like to help answer. And so this opportunity, this door opened when Dr. King, you know, I just happened to be in this lunchroom, and I raised my hand and said, I would do it. So how I had to pivot. I had to figure out how to change my lab in order to understand this question of, does the blast energy actually get into the brain to cause injury? So we did decide to make some devices that we could, see how kind of simulate a high pressure wave, because that's what a blast wave is, and expose them into some cells. I won't get into the details here, but we did see that the cells were responding. They were responding to pressure. They weren't getting physically hit with something or stretched. They were getting a pressure wave on them, and they were having some challenges. So I ended up taking this data and moving towards the VA again, and received some funding, and then became recognized with a career development award for our work in this area. So as you can see here, I was awarded the 2009, I was one of the individuals awarded a PCASE award. This is the first year that President Obama was there, and I can tell you the fun story later of how I ended up next to him, but that was a terrifying moment right there when the president reaches his arm around you. Tell you that, because there was Secret Service all over the place, and we were told not to touch him. So anyway, I was very lucky to be recognized for this work, and it really inspired me to continue moving. And so as I was, giving talks around the country on this field, I ran into Stefan Duma, which is him over here a long time ago. And he invited me to come and give a talk here at Virginia Tech, and really encouraged me to consider applying and growing this area. And it was another open door, and I was trying to decide whether I was going to take it or whether I was going to shut it. And, as at the time I did get tenure at Wayne State, and I was beginning to realize that, I could have new opportunities if I went to a new place. And Virginia Tech had a very welcoming atmosphere, and they're very well known for their injury biomechanics. And also we would be very close to DC, which is where a lot of my partners were at the time. So I had long talks with my husband. I mean, we had 2 young boys. We weren't sure, when do you move your family around the world? And not even around the world. I was only moving 4 states away. But this was a big decision for me. It was very hard to leave, the family that we had in Michigan. But we decided that, it was a great opportunity, and we moved here in 2011. And, my lab since then has been focused on these overarching problems of trying to solve that brain injury from a military related event such as a blast. We have these really novel facilities here at Virginia Tech, we were able to create these advanced blast simulators that helps us simulate. We're not allowed to bring explosive devices onto campus, so we had to create these other very unique and novel pieces of equipment that could simulate that blast wave without the explosion. And so I had great collaborators, here at Tech and around the country that really made us have this top facility here at Tech, and we're internationally known for these facilities now. I want to just point out a few things. None of this could be done in isolation. Team science is huge when you're moving forward in your career, and it's ever changing. We're always going to need new expertise. New questions are going to come about, and it's again, the word nimble is something that I use quite often. Is be ready to pivot and turn to a new direction and find new collaborators to help you accomplish your goals. We produced a lot of evidence that has now been widely accepted by the TBI community that blast itself does cause some brain injury, and that we're now looking at how to prevent that through either helmet redesign or treat it through stopping some of the cellular cascades that happen afterwards. I've had some internal accolades, which I'm very proud of, and I've also been had some national awards, as well as been placed on some emphasis panels, mainly because of my networking, and I really wanted to get out there and reach different individuals. And it's part of our careers, always looking for new collaborators and new challenges to face. But I think my biggest accomplishments are my students. I'm shown here with a couple of them. We always work hard. It's nonstop work for us, but we also take time to, this is us when, I don't know if you guys were here when Stinky Phil was on campus. So this is Stinky Phil, this plant. So we made time to go over there and see him. But you know, it's you have to take care of yourself as well as your career. Okay, so Trey told me to talk about lessons that I've learned throughout my career. Couple of them that I brought up, I want to talk a little bit about are identifying what your needs are in order to develop yourself into the professional that you want to be. Really important to kind of understand what skills you're going to need. So, you know, when that time came and I was interested in moving into engineering, I didn't have the skill set, right? I had to go back and take courses. And so I did that. I set a goal and did that. Maybe it'll be a time when you don't feel comfortable presenting to public, but that's part of, you know, the profession that you want to be in. So you'll take some workshops to enhance your presentation skills. So kind of understanding your limitations I hate the word weaknesses, but some challenges that you can overcome by just being prepared and learning new skills. Goal setting. So I think it's really important to kind of look out to, you know, it's hard, you know, as students to think about 5 or 10 years down the road, but even just 1 or 3 years down the road, you know, things are going to change. My 1 and 3 year goals when I was an assistant professor didn't, and even my 5-year goal didn't have me becoming, you know, an associate dean for research. But things change and leadership positions, the doors opened for me and I grabbed them. And it's just important to, you know, kind of set your goals, but also be realistic that those might change. And also being holistic about that. It's important to not only think about your career goals, but your family goals. So as I mentioned, you know, having a family is something that I wanted to do. You know, going to my son's baseball games is something that I prefer to do. I want to do, and I make time to do that because it's important to be holistic about your goals and understand and give yourselves the opportunity to accomplish both of those sides of things. But you do need to make some decisions. And some of them, you know, we're going to be very, very hard decisions. So this is lots of roads here. Some of them lead to the same place and some of them lead to different places. So you're all going to take different routes to get to an end goal. But, you know, some of the decisions you might make will close some roads. You know, the decision that I made not to leave Michigan and go work in industry closed a road for me, but it led to other roads. So it's important to know that just because one opportunity or one door might close, I'll guarantee you that 6 more will open. Set some action items and identify your resources. So it's important again to really say, I'm gonna, you know, take a class. Maybe it's something in order to grow your professional career, you need to get a mentor in a different area, or you need to join an association to expand your network. So all these things take resources. And by resources, some of it is money, of course, but other is time. It's really important to also, I'm going more than 20 minutes straight, but I'm almost done. It's also important to, you know, think about your timing of things and really have that kind of planned out so, you know, things don't sneak up on you. Setting deadlines is very important. It really forces you to make that commitment, but also accept if you can't make those deadlines. It's okay. You know, I think, you know, there's always going to be publications deadlines. If any of my students are on the call, they're laughing at me right now because I always talk about getting our publications out and setting deadlines. But those are always there, and it's good to have those guidelines for you, but also be okay that, you know, there might not be always set in stone. And then implementation. It's really important to be active, you know, just get out there and do it. If I wasn't out there sharing a lunch with my friends or my peers and colleagues at, you know, in that one conference room, I would have never had the question posed to me about looking at blast traumatic brain injury. So make sure that you're out there. I know a lot of time it takes to read and to learn, and a lot of that is in isolation, but also make the time to get out there and talk to people about their experiences, because you need a support system. You're not going to be, you know, rarely does anyone accomplish, especially nowadays, big, large projects in isolation. You're going to need your family to support you. You're going to need coworkers, you know, to support you, and mentors. I still will call Dr. Grimm. up to ask her questions. And I know that my students still call me to ask me questions. So build that support system and know it's okay to ask for help. Nimble again. So yes, make sure that you be nimble. Many doors will open and you got to be able to pivot when you want to say yes to those doors that are open. And I mentioned that no one can predict the future. Things just happen, and you need to be able to respond and be prepared and make adjustments in order to move in that potential area if that's what you decide. And as you saw through my career path, I went from working in a plant biology lab to working on biomaterials to working on the brain. So, passions change with time. New opportunities will present themselves. So be willing to try something new, because, diversifying your life is how you become innovative. Don't be afraid to take a chance and go in a new direction. And, my whole life, I just keep asking questions. So never stop asking questions, which leads me to my end. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Wow, Pam, what a excellent presentation. I really, really enjoyed it. I have so many questions myself, but I'm not going to ask my questions first because we have questions in the chat. I'm going to go there. The first question that's out there is, why is networking important as a woman engineer?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really important. During my time at Wayne State, it was a relatively smaller school. There wasn't a lot of people that knew about Wayne State. And so it was really important for us to travel and go to conferences and network in order to, have people recognize what we were doing there. Obviously Virginia Tech is a lot larger community, but it is very important to make sure that, I firmly believe that, diversity in many different ways leads to innovation, and going out and meeting new people and sharing ideas can really begin a whole new area of research for you. So, as well as, job opportunities and everything. So, it's really important to get out there and network.
Thank you. Another question is coming from Emma. She asks, have you ever experienced discrimination and or microaggressions as a female in this field? How have you handled them?
The answer is yes, of course. How have I handled them? So I had a lot of comments actually from my peers when I began having my family, to be honest. There was a lot of comments about, you have to go home to your family, and so you shouldn't have this opportunity, or, it was very challenging to try to understand where those people were coming from, because I felt I deserved those opportunities. It didn't matter that I had a family. And so it's really just realizing that they don't understand, to be honest. They don't know your strengths. And so you need to step up and show them. It's hard to, I was telling Trey, I have a very thick skin, and it's not just from the cold weather in Michigan. There was a lot of times, and I hate to, I don't want to link groups together, but doing military research, there's a lot of very strong male personnel in the military. And they didn't necessarily want a woman telling them what was going on with their soldiers. And it was very challenging. There was a lot of controversy during that time, because it wasn't that the military didn't want to protect their soldiers. They didn't understand the injury that was occurring. And it was important, for us to stress the science, and I provided data to them until it pretty much built my credibility up, right? So unfortunately, that has happened a lot in my career, and I'm not going to say it's not going to happen. And nowadays, I'm sure it probably is still out there, but I do think, hope people are, being more open to different minds and different you know, diverse set of people and understanding that they have value. And I just was persistent and kept fighting my way through. So I don't even really like obviously talking about that kind of thing because it does still bother me that the pushback that I got because I was a woman, but you just got to power through it and look at I'm here now. So somebody thinks I'm important enough to talk to you guys.
Yes, and I think it's important because it validates the experience. And that's a great segue to the next question from Lindsay. She said, you briefly mentioned the pros and cons of transitioning from student to faculty at the same university. How did you set yourself apart from your PI slash instructors? Do you have tips on confidently interacting with previous instructors who now become your colleagues?
Yeah, very good question. What was I think I was in a little bit better situation than maybe another person might be in. So my PhD laboratory was in the hospital. And my lab that I was given as an assistant professor was actually in an academic building. So I was physically not where my PI was, my I should say my faculty mentor. We weren't physically in the same building. So it was helpful not having that individual around. And like I said, I don't mean to be disrespectful about that, but just that if you're always with that individual, they're going to think that you're still under that individual. So you really need to set yourself apart, I actually think physically, in order to establish yourself as an independent researcher and independent questions. And then the research that I developed, I began going into more of the neuroscience area instead of the orthopedics. So that was very different from what Dr. Woolley was doing. So, but it was challenging. I mean, there were several of my now peers that were my teachers, like Dr. Grimm. I still call her Dr. Grimm, even though, she tells me to call her Michelle because that's how I think of her. But at the time I had to start calling her Michelle because I had to say, I am now your peer. So it's really takes, retraining your brain to kind of think of things like that and making a point of when I say, Michelle, I'd like to talk to you, that she thought of me as the faculty member and not the student anymore. It is a challenge, and it's definitely a mindset you got to kind of retrain yourself to think like that. But they were, I had a great group around me, and they were very good about respecting that I was at their level when I moved into that position.
Thank you, Pam. Lots of people are saying this is such an inspiring story, and a lot of these are transferable for men, not just women as well.
And I wanted to make sure. I mean, I know I started off talking about me being a girly girl and girls not always getting the same, toys when they're little and stuff like that. We're made to go down the pink aisle versus the car aisle. But I really do feel these overall themes that I've kind of come across are very neutral. And that's what I wanted to end with, is understanding that, we all have the same types of challenges. We might respond in a different manner, whatever is best for us. But I'm glad to hear that kind of came through.
Awesome. The next question on the chat is, did you regret closing the doors or opportunities early near graduation? Another question to put with that, what was the impact of the discussion about moving 4 states away in your family life and relationships?
Okay, so I'll go with the first one. Do I regret closing some doors?
Yes.
No, to be honest. I mean, I don't think, I'm very, very fortunate to be where I am today. I have 2 healthy sons, a great husband who's been very supportive. My family comes to visit, right? So there was, that initial concern about closing that door, about leaving Michigan, but then it happened at the right time. So it's kind of like that opportunity represented itself in a different way when I got the opportunity to move down to here to Virginia Tech. So I do think if it's meant to happen, you'll get yourself in that, the choices you make will lead you back there if it was meant, if that was where you are. So So I'm going to say no. I don't regret that at all. The second part was
the impact of your discussions about moving 4 states away in your family
Mhm.
life.
Yeah. hmm Yeah, that was one of the more challenging, decisions that we had to make. We had a very good, as I talked about, you build this support around you, and Trey always says it takes a village, right? And so we had that there, and we were very concerned about moving and the impact it would have on our children. To be honest, that was the most important thing to us. But when we did a lot of searching and looking into this area, and felt very comfortable that this would be a good area to raise a family in. And so, and realistically, there's people that live, the world away, right? The other side of the world. So we do, we realized that even though it seemed far at the time, it's really wasn't as far. And I like saying the same time zone. My mom appreciated that. So we didn't have to figure out the time zone differences. But yeah, it's probably, again, one of the biggest, questions and decisions that we had to make. But we, just had a lot of discussion and did a lot of research and made a decision.
Thank you. Another question this person is proposing: did you feel disadvantaged when it came to pursuing opportunities because you were a woman?
I did. There was a lot of, especially, as I moved more into the military research side of things, there was a lot of, I would go to these workshops where they would start discussing about, what research needed to be done, the research gaps. And there was a lot of people pairing up as team members. And I noticed that, I wasn't being included. So I do think there was a little bit of disadvantage, but you just have to work your way through it. I mean, again, being persistent and showing that you have value to add goes a long way. So not sure if that answered the question fully, but.
Well, and I think it gets to the next question. What methods do you use to get people to take you seriously as a female engineer?
Data. People can't really fight data, to be honest, although they can. But realistically, if you can show them, whatever the question is, and the data that you've collected to support what you're saying or what you're suggesting, walking them through those steps and showing them this is credible, is really important. And it definitely begins, having people making people realize that, yeah, maybe she does have, some value in this field. And it is very exciting now to be asked, to go internationally and speak, because it has been a struggle to be accepted into that area. But we did it. Just kept chugging away at it.
Another great question. This is: how
Wow.
do you develop thick skin? I easily get emotional and feel the need to defend/prove myself.
Yes. So the best advice I ever got is don't answer an email immediately. Because you'll get an email and you'll want to respond emotionally. I'm that type of person as well. I do have my emotions come out quite frequently. So take time, kind of take a step back, and really just kind of organize your thoughts instead of reacting right away. It's probably one of the worst things you can do is react right away, because a lot of times those people are trying to get you to react, right? And it kind of throws you off, and that's not how you want to be seen. That's not, you don't want to be seen as a very intelligent and thoughtful person. So it does take training. I mean, there was several times where I wanted to blast somebody, all right, just so to speak. But you just, it's not professional. So just, taking the time to step back and really organize your thoughts, and then formulate a response. And if you have to, go out and get a cup of coffee because you're at your workplace, do it. Whatever you need to do to kind of then collect yourself and come back in a rational manner. That's, what the goal is.
Thank you for that, Pam. Krista asked the question: Do you think there are certain time periods in our career where it makes the most sense slash works better, or will it always be equally difficult to fit in? Is there anything you could do differently if you could go back? Does maternity leave impact the tenure clock?
Mhm. So at my time, it did. I know currently at Virginia Tech, it doesn't. You actually can get it's called time is it time off or whatnot for maternity leave, and actually fathers can get it for paternity leave as well. So Virginia Tech is one of those institutes that really supports the family work-life balance. So that's something when you guys are actually looking for positions outside of, when you graduate, is to ask those type of questions. Do you can you get, does your tenure clock stop when I'm thinking, when I'm pregnant or when I have a maternity leave? So make sure you find out, because I'm sure there's places out there that don't support that as well. But that's a good question. And what was the other part of that? Sorry, I'm trying to read back into the chat. About having certain times in your career it's better, makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I think there was something about fitting in, right? Earlier. It is definitely harder when you're starting off. Your associate professor days or your assistant professor days are a lot more challenging to fit in, because you do have, a lot of people that you feel, even though they don't know your field as much as you do, because that's what your expertise in. You feel that they have more experience than you, and so it does take a lot of effort, and just putting yourself out there to be part of that crew, in order to do that. But I think once I'm not going to say I'm sure there's still a time that I feel that I don't fit in, but you also get to an age where, if I don't fit in, then maybe I just don't need to be there. I feel like, there's a lot of things that are going on that are very positive in the world, and that's what I want to be part of. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. Sorry. Is it Krista?
A question from Molly. She asks, what can we do to make things better for future female engineers?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question too. You guys are really on top of it today. I think, really understanding that, well, I think it's not just for females, but I think females take it a little bit harder, is knowing that there is a life outside of your work, and that you can have a family, you can do both. To accept, as a leader, what we're trying to do, my current role is giving, females the opportunity for leadership positions. That's one thing, is what we're trying to do as an institute, is to grow. And the more leaders we have that are female, I think the more, how do I say this? The more balanced they'll be, to make things better for females that are coming up in the ranks. And our voices, we always support each other. There's a lot of, when you get into a university, there usually will be a group of female engineers that will meet. We have one here, and we talk and support each other. So just, kind of, providing opportunities. That's what I like to do with my students. As you saw, a lot of my students are female. Providing opportunities for others, for females, is a great thing. And as students, I hope you guys get involved in some of the science days and fairs, and outreach, participation, to encourage the younger generation, to engage them and let them know it's okay to kind of tinker around with matchbox cars and stuff like that. So
Thank you. And Emma is asking a question. I really enjoyed the details you shared from your childhood photos about wearing pink and being a girly girl. Have you ever felt like you needed to suppress your femininity? What strategies have you used to stay true to yourself?
what strategies? So I still get my nails done. I like keeping my nails girly. But that being a joke aside, sorry. It's I don't suppress it. I don't. I don't feel that. I think being a female is a valuable component to a team. You know, if we're designing or trying to make the quality of life better for individuals around the country, half of us are female, more than half of us are female. So I don't try to suppress it. I like giving the viewpoint of the woman's viewpoint of things, to help, you know, engage others to think that way. So so yeah, I hope I guess, you know, and I didn't even realize I'm wearing pink today, but yeah, I do not suppress my femininity, but I also, you know, my goal is to, you know, provide better opportunities for all. So I do obviously encourage everyone to continue developing their career paths. So.
We have another great question as well. This person was wondering, what was the key game changer that pushed you to think big about non-visible contemporary issues in your field? She was looking at, or this person was looking at how we could, in a certain time, advance our work to be more impactful. And she said, thanks for your thoughts in advance.
Yeah. Trying to see how to answer that. So a game changer that pushed you to think about non-visible contemporary issues. You know, to be honest, one I didn't really talk about this example, but I spoke about one of the faculty members, Michelle Graham, that helped me kind of choose the path that I did into biomedical engineering. And one of the game changers for me in supporting females in our field was she actually was teaching one of my classes, biomaterials, when she was 9 months pregnant. And every day she would come in and we would kind of chuckle and say, oh, we haven't had your baby yet. And believe it or not, our last final exam, she called her graduate student in and told him to watch us during our final exam because she was going to go have her baby. And she did that night. So just seeing the commitment that she had towards, you know, the education of us, but also, you know, the thought about protecting her, that she was actually there, you know, at that stage of pregnancy, and luckily everything was fine. But seeing how, you know, it kind of motivated me to kind of move towards the protection of, you know, females and, you know, not developing their families, having families, and just supporting them, you know, in any way that we can, and trying to, you know, in a leadership position, also pushing those types of policies through to protect females as they're going through their careers here. So hopefully that's something that you were asking about.
Well, Pam, we have come close to the end of the hour, and I just want to say thank you so much for presenting. This was a very authentic presentation. It taught me some things that I need to do to make sure that we're being inclusive and bringing people to the table like women to make sure that they take up space as well. We're going to help them blast through in order to become engineers. I just want to say thank you so much for this presentation. I do owe you coffee. And I want to tell everyone that our next presentation will happen on October 11th, Networking, the Link to Your Future. Please sign up for that. If you have any questions about that, please let us know. Again, I just want to say thank you, Pam, for presenting.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I guess I did stress at the end, if anyone does want to contact me, I'm always happy to go, as Trey has mentioned, go for coffee. So feel free.
Please reach out. She's really authentic about meeting and networking. So we are done. Thank you all so much for attending.